Hi everybody! In this video we are going to continue with some more example problems about the Pythagorean theorem. I want to remind you that the Pythagorean theorem is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Where a and b are the legs, so these are our two legs, and then c is our hypotenuse. So in this case we would have x squared plus 8 squared equals 12 squared. First thing we're going to do is actually square these values. So 8 times 8 is 64, and 12 times 12 is 144. So then we get x, and then I can subtract 64 on both sides, and we get that x squared is 80. Then I take the square root on both sides, and we get x is the square root of 80. Like before, we will simplify this. So the square root of 80, remember we're looking for a perfect square that goes into 80, which would be 16 and 5. So we would get 4 square root of 5 as our final answer. One short reminder about simplifying radicals. If you took the square root of 80 and you said that it was 4 and 20, that's fine. But now you have the square root of 20 that you have to simplify again into square root of 4 and the square root of 5. That's where the 2 times 2 comes in to get our final answer. So remember, if you need to simplify your radicals in multiple steps, that's okay. Just make sure that you do ensure that the number inside our radical should not have any radicals as a factor of it. So our next problem, if I set up my Pythagorean theorem, I'm going to go back to red over here, and we do 4 squared plus parentheses 4 square root of 3 squared equals x squared. This is super important. You are squaring this entire value. We are doing 4 root 3 times 4 root 3. If you do not do parentheses, then that exponent will only apply to the last part of that number. And what you would do is you would be doing 4 root 3 times root 3. So that would be if you wrote down this without any parentheses, because you're only squaring that last piece. These are not the same thing. This is bad. Do not do that. We want to square the entire thing. So when we square the entire thing, we're going to do 4 times 4 is 16, and then the square root of 3 times the square root of 3, that would give us the square root of 9, which is just 3, and that's where we get 48. If you do it this way, you would get 24, which is, or not 24, you get 36, which is not the correct number. You have to make sure, or sorry, you get 12. You have to make sure that you have both 4s here. So this would give us 16 plus 48. This is also important because if you're using a calculator to help you, if you do not do parentheses, the calculator will assume you're talking about this. Okay, so you have to put the parentheses around the entire thing you're squaring. Now when I add them up, I get 64 equals x squared. So x is the square root of 64. And in this case, we just get 8 for x. The key with this one is that you need to do parentheses. That is what matters the most. Okay? If you do not do the parentheses, it will give you the incorrect value. And now we have 2 word problems. The first word problem says, a baseball diamond is a square with sides of 90 feet. So I can kind of draw this square. That was very bad square, but you see we've got some right angles, and every side is 90 feet. what is the shortest distance to the nearest tenth of a foot between first base and third base? So that would be first to third. So they're looking for that. So what we actually have here is two right triangles where we're looking for the hypotenuse. So if I draw that one triangle, here's my right angle. This is what we're solving for. And so that means that this is going to be my hypotenuse, and these will be A and B. So when I'm setting up my Pythagorean theorem, I'm going to get 90 squared plus 90 squared equals c squared. This is 8,100 plus 8,100, which is 16,200 equals c squared. So c is the square root of 16,200. This would be where I take my calculator and I evaluate the square root of 16,200, which in my calculator gives me 127.279 and some other numbers. And they tell me to the nearest tenth of a foot. So tenth of a foot is right here. It's our 0.2. And that 7 is going to tell us to round up. So we would get 127.3 feet. In our last problem, they tell us two joggers run 8 miles north. So 8 miles north, we could assume north is up. And then 5 miles west. What is the shortest distance to the nearest tenth of a mile they must travel to return to their starting point? Now we know the shortest distance is going to be a straight line. So the shortest distance would be this piece right here. So we know that, I'm going to rewrite that 8 miles over here. We know that they are traveling, they want to travel along this diagonal. That is the hypotenuse of our right triangle. So if I go to solve this, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. This would be 5 squared plus 8 squared equals c squared, which would be 25 plus 64. 25 plus 64 is 89. And then I'm going to take out my calculator, and I'm going to do the square root of 89. I know I can do this on my calculator because they are telling me to round my answer. Since they're telling me to round my answer, I know that the calculator is fine. And that gives me, so the square root of 89 is c, and that is approximately 9.4 miles. And that's how we do Pythagorean theorem. The key is to remember that to identify your hypotenuse correctly. Make sure you include parentheses if you have like an expression as one of those values instead of just a single number. And just be careful with how you're setting up your problems. Thank you guys for watching.